The envelope sat in the center of the engagement party table, cream-colored and elegant, with my name written in gold calligraphy, from Teresa open last. My son Paulo's fiancée Melissa reached for it with that practiced smile she wore whenever cameras were pointed her direction, surrounded by 80 guests at their celebration in Austin. She'd already opened gifts from everyone else, kitchen appliances, wine collections, checks for their honeymoon, but she'd saved mine for last because I'd specifically requested it. And everyone in that room assumed sweet old Teresa had something heartfelt prepared. What they didn't know, what Melissa and Paulo couldn't have imagined, was that inside that envelope were photographs, bank statements, and a letter that would expose the elaborate con they'd been running on me for 18 months. But what nobody expected, what even I didn't know until that moment, was that the real gift wasn't the envelope at all.
My name is Teresa Silva, and this story begins 2 years ago when my son brought home a woman who seemed too good to be true, which should have been my first warning because things that seem too good to be true usually are. I came to Texas from Brazil 40 years ago with my husband Marcos and our 3-year-old son, Paulo. Marcos worked construction. I cleaned offices at night, and we saved every dollar we could because we had dreams bigger than our circumstances. Paulo would go to college, become successful, never know the kind of poverty we'd escaped in São Paulo. And we succeeded. Paulo graduated from UT Austin, got his MBA, became a financial consultant, making 6 figures by 30. We were so proud we could barely speak without crying. Marcos died of lung cancer 6 years ago. The last thing he said to me was, "Our boy made it, meu amor. Everything we did was worth it." I held his hand and believed him. Believed that all our sacrifices had meaning. That Paulo's success justified our struggles. I was wrong about many things, but nothing prepared me for how spectacularly wrong I was about my son. After Marcos died, I lived alone in our small house in Round Rock, the house we'd bought 25 years ago and finally paid off. It was modest, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a backyard with the vegetable garden Marcos had planted. The neighborhood had changed around us, gotten nicer, property values skyrocketing as Austin expanded. Our little house that we'd bought for $60,000 was now worth over $500,000, sitting on land that developers eyed hungrily. Paulo visited every Sunday after Marcos died, bringing groceries, fixing things around the house, being the good son we'd raised him to be. Then he met Melissa at some networking event. And within 3 months, Sunday visits became bi-weekly. Within 6 months, they stopped entirely except for phone calls where Paulo always sounded rushed, distracted. "Sorry, May. Melissa and I are busy with work stuff." Always Melissa and I, never just I. She'd absorbed him completely, and I told myself it was normal that young couples needed time together, that I shouldn't be possessive. But mothers have instincts for a reason, and mine were screaming that something was wrong, though I ignored them because I wanted Paulo to be happy more than I wanted to be right. I met Melissa exactly twice before the engagement. First meeting, Paulo brought her to my house for Sunday lunch. She was 32 to Paulo's 35. Beautiful in that polished way that comes from money and good genes. Blonde hair perfectly styled, designer clothes. A smile that never quite reached her eyes. She walked through my house like she was touring a museum, touching things carefully, making small sounds of interest that felt performative. "This house is so authentic," she said. And the way she said authentic made it sound like an insult disguised as a compliment. "Have you ever thought about renovating? Opening up these walls would make it so much more modern." "It's fine as it is," I said. "Marcos and I raised Paulo here. Every room has memories. Of course, memories are important. But you know what they say, can't live in the past forever." She smiled at Paulo, who smiled back like she'd said something profound instead of something cruel dressed up as wisdom. Second meeting, Paulo's birthday dinner at an expensive restaurant downtown. Melissa dominated the conversation, talking about their plans, the wedding they'd have. She wasn't engaged yet, but spoke like it was inevitable. The house they'd buy in Westlake, the lifestyle they'd build. Every sentence started with we, but really meant she. "We're thinking destination wedding, somewhere tropical. We're looking at houses in the $1 million range. Anything less would be settling.
We need to start thinking about investments. Real estate is where the real money is. That last comment was directed at me with a meaningful look, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach, though I didn't understand yet what that look meant or how much it would cost me. 3 months after that dinner, Paulo called with news. May, I proposed. Melissa said yes. We're engaged. It's wonderful, Nufito. When did you propose? Last night, at the restaurant where we had our first date. It was perfect. I had the ring, the flowers, a photographer to capture everything. Melissa was so surprised. I'm happy for you. When do I get to celebrate with you? Actually, about that, we're planning an engagement party next month. Big celebration, all our friends and family. You'll get to meet Melissa's parents, her friends. It'll be great. I'd love to help plan it. Maybe host it here in the backyard. Your father and I hosted your sister's engagement party here, remember? Silence on the line? Then Maine, that's really sweet, but Melissa's already hired an event planner, and the party's going to be at this amazing venue in Austin. Your house is, well, it's not really set up for the kind of party Melissa wants. Not set up. My house, the house where Paulo had been raised, where we'd celebrated every birthday and graduation and achievement, wasn't good enough for his fiancée's party. And I swallowed that rejection because I told myself it was about logistics, not about me being inadequate. The invitation arrived 2 weeks later. Cream cardstock with gold embossing, formal and expensive. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Paulo Silva and Melissa Montgomery. There was a dress code, cocktail attire. A note about gifts. In lieu of traditional gifts, the couple requests contributions to their honeymoon fund. And at the bottom, handwritten, Teresa, Paulo and I would love to talk to you privately. Before the party. Can you come an hour early? Important family matter. Melissa, important family matter. Those words should have been a warning. But I thought, maybe she wanted to discuss wedding plans, wanted my blessing officially, wanted to build a relationship with her future mother-in-law. I was spectacularly wrong. I arrived at the venue an hour early as requested. It was a beautiful space in downtown Austin, exposed brick floor-to-ceiling windows, catering staff in black uniforms preparing for the 80 guests who'd arrive soon. Paulo and Melissa were in a private room. And when I walked in, they were sitting on a leather couch with papers spread on the coffee table. Thanks for coming early. Paulo stood, hugged me, but his hug felt stiff, rehearsed. Sit down. We need to talk about something important. I sat in the chair across from them, my hands suddenly cold. What's wrong? Is someone sick? No, nothing like that. Melissa leaned forward, her smile warm but her eyes calculating. Teresa, Paulo and I have been thinking about our future. We want to buy a house, start our life together properly. But housing in Austin is so expensive, and we're a bit stretched financially with the wedding costs. I thought you both had good jobs? We do, but weddings are expensive, and we want something special. Plus, we need money for a down payment on a house. That's where you come in. She slid papers across the table. We were thinking your house in Round Rock is worth about $550,000 now. If you signed it over to Paulo, we could sell it, use the money for our house purchase and wedding, and we'd help you find a nice senior apartment, something smaller, easier to maintain. You'd be so much more comfortable. The room tilted. You want me to give you my house? Not give, transfer ownership to Paulo. Technically, it would all stay in the family. And Teresa, think about it practically. You're 71 years old living alone in a house that's too big for you. The yard work, the maintenance, the property taxes. Wouldn't it be easier to be in a small apartment where someone else handles all that? That house is my home. Marcos and I. Marcos is gone. Melissa's voice was gentle but firm. And holding on to a house because of memories isn't practical. Paulo is your son, your only child. Don't you want to help him start his married life properly? I looked at Paulo, waiting for him to tell his fiancée that this was insane, that he'd never ask me to give up my home. But Paulo was looking at the papers, not at me, and when he finally spoke,
His voice was small. Now, Melissa's right. The house is too much for you. And you'd be helping us out so much. We've already talked to a realtor. They think we could get $550, maybe $600 if we stage it right. That would be enough for a down payment on a really nice place in Westlake and still cover most of the wedding. And you talked to a realtor about my house without asking me? We were just exploring options. No. I stood up, my legs shaking, but my voice steady. No, I'm not signing over my house. That house is mine. Marcos and I worked 40 years to pay it off. I'm not giving it up so you can have a fancy wedding in a house in Westlake. Melissa's smile disappeared. Teresa, I don't think you're understanding the situation. Paulo is your only child. When you die, he'll inherit the house anyway. We're just asking you to transfer it now, when we actually need it. Instead of making us wait until I'm dead, you're asking me to give up my home now so you don't have to wait for me to die? That's not what I said. That's exactly what you said. I picked up my purse. I'm leaving. I'm not signing anything. And I'm not coming to your engagement party. Wait. Paulo stood, but I was already at the door. You have a choice to make, Paulo. Your mother who sacrificed everything for you, or the woman who wants to take everything from me. Choose wisely. I walked out of that room, out of that venue, and drove home crying so hard I had to pull over twice. When I got home, I sat in my living room, the room where Paulo had taken his first steps, where we'd celebrated every Christmas, where Marcos had died in my arms, and I understood that I'd lost my son to a woman who saw me as an obstacle rather than family. That should have been the end of it. I should have cut contact, protected myself, accepted that Paulo had chosen Melissa over me. But 3 days later, something happened that changed everything. My neighbor Carla knocked on my door holding a casserole in concern. Teresa, I heard about the engagement party. You missed it. I wasn't feeling well. I lied. Oh, honey. Well, I wanted to bring you this, and also, I need to tell you something. I probably shouldn't, but you deserve to know. She sat at my kitchen table, looking uncomfortable. My nephew works at the bank downtown, the one where Paulo works as a financial consultant. Yes? Teresa, there are rumors about Paulo, about client money going missing. Nothing official yet, but internal auditors are investigating. And the amounts they're talking about, it's substantial. My blood turned to ice. How substantial? Over $200,000. Missing from accounts Paulo manages. Carla squeezed my hand. I don't know if it's true. I hope it's not, but I thought you should know. After Carla left, I sat at that kitchen table for 3 hours thinking, Paulo needing money urgently, Melissa pushing for the house, their desperate request to help them start their married life. It wasn't about starting a life, it was about covering tracks, hiding theft, making stolen money disappear into a real estate purchase where it couldn't be traced. My son wasn't just selfish, he was a thief. And his fiancée was helping him, possibly directing him, using him to steal from his own clients, and then from his own mother to cover it up. I should have called Paulo, confronted him, given him a chance to explain. But something in me, call it instinct, call it self-preservation, said to be quiet, to be strategic, to gather information before acting. So I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus Chen, a former FBI agent who specialized in financial crimes. I paid him $5,000, a huge chunk of my savings, to investigate Paulo and Melissa. What he found over the next month was worse than I'd imagined. Paulo had been embezzling from client accounts for 2 years. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. Over $300,000 total. He'd been using it to maintain the lifestyle. Melissa demanded expensive restaurants, designer clothes, the engagement ring that had cost $40,000. But the bank had finally noticed internal auditors were closing in, and Paulo was desperate. But here's what made it truly diabolical. Melissa knew everything. In fact, Marcus found emails suggesting she'd been the one to suggest the embezzlement.
to identify which accounts were vulnerable, to plan how they'd cover their tracks. She keyed in corporate law, she knew exactly how to hide financial crimes, and she was using Paulo to execute her plan while keeping herself legally protected. The house was their exit strategy. Sell my house, claim the proceeds were a family gift, use that money to pay back what Paulo had stolen before the auditors caught him. Then blame any discrepancies on accounting errors, and I'd be left homeless or in some small apartment, none the wiser about what they'd really used my home for. Marcus handed me a folder thick with evidence. Teresa, with this you could send them both to prison. The question is, what do you want to do? What did I want? I wanted my son back. The boy who'd called me every day, who'd kissed my cheek and said TMO May before bed every night. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd steal from clients and his own mother to please a woman who saw people as resources to exploit. I want justice, I said, but I want them to destroy themselves first. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus and I developed a plan. It was risky, possibly stupid, definitely vindictive, but it was also strategic, and it would expose Paulo and Melissa in the most public, humiliating way possible at their engagement party, which I'd been uninvited from but would attend anyway. I called Paulo 3 days before the party. Mio figlio, I'm sorry. I overreacted. I've been thinking about what you and Melissa said, and you're right. The house is too much for me. I'd like to come to the party, give you my blessing, and we can talk about the house transfer after. Silence on the line. Then Paulo's voice, cautious but hopeful. Really? That's wonderful. Melissa will be so happy. You're making the right choice. I know. I love you, Paulo. I just want you to be happy. I love you too, man. We both hung up. He was lying about loving me. You don't steal from people you love. I was lying about giving them the house. You don't reward people for trying to rob you. But we both had our roles to play until the party where one of us would finally tell the truth. The engagement party was Saturday night, the same venue where we'd had our disastrous conversation. I arrived in a simple black dress, carrying a gift bag in the cream envelope I'd had specially prepared. Inside the envelope were copies of everything Marcus had found. Bank statements showing Paulo's embezzlement, emails between Paulo and Melissa planning how to cover it up, screenshots of the realtor conversations about my house, even photos Marcus had taken of Melissa meeting with one of Paulo's clients to discuss investment opportunities that were really opportunities to steal more money. But the real gift, the one nobody would see coming, was something else entirely. The party was beautiful. String lights, champagne fountains, a dessert bar that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. 80 guests mingled, Paulo's colleagues, Melissa's law firm friends, family members. I didn't recognize. I stood in the corner holding my glass of champagne, watching Paulo and Melissa work the room like politicians. All smiles and hand-holding and performative affection. Melissa's parents were there, Richard and Patricia Montgomery, old money from Houston, dressed in clothes that cost more than my car. They held court by the bar, talking loudly about their vacation home in Colorado and their yacht in Galveston. When they saw me, Patricia's smile was gracious, but her eyes were cold. You must be Teresa, Paulo's mother. How lovely to finally meet you. Lovely to meet you too. Paulo speaks so highly of you. And we hear you're being so generous with the house situation. That's very giving of you. The pause before giving was deliberate, suggesting that giving away my home was expected rather than generous. And I smiled through my rage. I just want Paulo to be happy. Well, he certainly will be once he and Melissa are married. They make such a perfect couple. Perfect. That word would haunt me later, but in that moment I just nodded and excused myself, finding a spot near the gift table where I could watch without participating. The gift opening came after dinner, after speeches from Melissa's maid of honor and Paulo's best friend. After toasts to the happy couple's future, Melissa insisted on opening gifts publicly so everyone can see how loved we are and worked through them systematically. Kitchen appliances from cousins, wine collections from colleagues, checks and white envelopes from friends.
She thanked everyone graciously, performatively, making sure each gift was acknowledged properly for the social media photos being taken constantly. Then she reached for my envelope. "Oh, look, Paulo, your mom's gift." She said to open it last, so it must be special. She winked at the crowd. Probably the house deed, right? Laughter. Knowing laughter from people who'd been told about the house situation, who thought it was charming that the elderly mother was giving away her property to help her son. I felt my face burn but kept my expression neutral. Melissa opened the envelope carefully, pulling out the papers inside. Her smile was fixed in place until she actually read what she was holding. Then her face went pale. She looked at Paulo, who grabbed the papers, read them, and went even paler. "What is this?" Melissa's voice was sharp, dropping the gracious act. "What the hell is this?" "Those are bank statements," I said calmly, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, showing that Paulo has embezzled over $300,000 from his clients over the past 2 years. And emails between the two of you planning how to cover it up, and photos of you, Melissa, meeting with Paulo's clients to set up fake investment accounts. The room went silent. Everyone was staring now. "This is insane," Paulo started, but I cut him off. "It's not insane. It's documented by a private investigator. The same investigator who discovered that you two were planning to steal my house, sell it, and use the proceeds to pay back what Paulo stole before the bank auditors caught him. You weren't asking me to help you start your married life. You were asking me to fund covering up your crimes." Melissa recovered first, her lawyer training kicking in. "These documents are forged, Teresa. I understand you're upset about the house situation, but making false accusations is something I can back up." Marcus Chen stepped forward from where he'd been standing near the bar, holding his own folder. "Marcus Chen, former FBI, now private investigator. I have original documents, recorded conversations and testimony from 3 of Paulo's clients who've noticed discrepancies in their accounts. Mrs. Silva hired me to investigate her son after she became suspicious of his financial desperation. Everything in that envelope is authentic and admissible in court." The room erupted. People pulling out phones, taking photos, recording video. Melissa's parents looked horrified. Paulo's colleagues were backing away from him like he was radioactive. And Paulo just stood there, frozen, holding papers that proved his guilt. "Mané," he whispered, "how could you do this?" "How could I? How could you?" My voice rose, breaking. "I gave you everything. Your father and I worked ourselves to exhaustion so you could have opportunities we never had. We paid for your education, your apartment when you started your career, your car when yours broke down. We loved you unconditionally. And you repaid us by trying to steal my home to cover up your theft from innocent people who trusted you." I was desperate. "You were greedy? There's a difference?" I turned to address the whole room now, all these people who'd come to celebrate, a couple who'd been planning to victimize me. My son asked me to give up my home. The home I shared with his father for 30 years. The home where we raised him, where every room holds memories of our family. And when I said no, he was going to take it anyway through manipulation and pressure and making me feel guilty for not helping him. "Teresa, you're being dramatic." Melissa tried to regain control, but I wasn't done. But here's what Paulo and Melissa didn't know. I would have helped them if they'd been honest. If they'd come to me and said, "May, I made terrible mistakes. I stole money. I need help fixing this before I go to prison," I would have found a way. I would have taken out a loan against the house. I would have sold my car. I would have done anything to save my son from the consequences of his choices. Because that's what mothers do. We save our children even when they don't deserve it. Paulo's face crumpled. "Then why didn't you?" "Because you never asked for help. You asked for my house. You asked me to make myself homeless so you could cover up your crimes without facing any consequences. You asked me to sacrifice everything while learning nothing. And that, meu filho, I couldn't do. Because saving you from consequences isn't the same as saving you from yourself." I picked up my purse, handed Marcus's folder to Paulo. "These are copies. Marcus has the originals, and he's already given them to the FBI and the Texas State Bar Association. Melissa, you'll be investigated for conspiracy to commit fraud. Paulo, you'll be charged with embezzlement and probably disbarred. And both of you will face the consequences you've been trying so desperately to avoid. You're sending your own son to prison? Patricia Montgomery's voice was shrill with horror. No, he's sending himself to prison. I'm just refusing to pay his bail with my house. I looked at Paulo one last time. I love you. I will always love you. But I love myself too much to let you destroy me, to save yourself. I walked out of that venue for the second time, but this time I wasn't crying. I was angry, heartbroken, but also strangely free. Free from the guilt they'd been using to manipulate me. Free from the obligation to sacrifice myself for people who saw me as a resource rather than a person. Marcus drove me home. Teresa, you did the right thing. Doesn't feel right. It feels like I destroyed my son's life. He destroyed his own life. You just refused to be collateral damage. Marcus pulled up to my house. My house, that was still mine. That would always be mine. The FBI wants to interview you tomorrow. And Teresa, there's something else you should know. What? Melissa's married, still married, to a guy in Houston. They've been separated but never divorced. The engagement to Paulo isn't legal. She was planning to commit marriage fraud on top of everything else. I sat in Marcus's car processing this new information. Melissa wasn't just a thief and a manipulator. She was also potentially a bigamist, which meant Paulo had been played even more thoroughly than I'd realized. Does Paulo know? I don't think so. I only found out yesterday when I did a final background check. Her husband filed for divorce last week. Apparently, he saw the engagement announcement and realized she was trying to remarry while still legally bound to him. I started laughing. Couldn't help it. The whole situation was so absurd, so thoroughly catastrophic, that laughter was the only response that made sense. Paulo had embezzled $300,000 to please a woman who was still married to someone else, and now he was going to prison for it. He's going to hate me forever, I said when I stopped laughing. Maybe prison will give him time to figure out who he really is, versus who he became for her. Either way, Teresa, you saved yourself. That counts for something. The next few weeks were chaos. The FBI investigation, Paulo's arrest, Melissa's arrest, on separate charges including marriage fraud. The story made local news. Financial consultant embezzles hundreds of thousands. Mother exposes him at engagement party. I got threatening calls from Melissa's family, from Paulo's colleagues who'd lost money, from people who thought I should have protected my son regardless of what he'd done. But I also got calls of support from Carla, my neighbor, who brought over dinner every night for 2 weeks. From women at my church who'd faced similar choices with their own children and understood the agony of choosing right over family. From strangers who'd seen the news coverage and wanted to tell me I was brave. Brave? I didn't feel brave. I felt like a mother who'd failed to raise a son with strong enough character to resist corruption. But everyone insisted I'd done the right thing, so I tried to believe them, though belief was harder than action. Paulo was released on bail pending trial. He moved back to Austin, staying with a friend since he couldn't afford his apartment anymore. The bank had fired him immediately, and his legal fees were astronomical. He didn't call me for 6 weeks. Then one evening, my doorbell rang. It was Paulo, thinner than I'd ever seen him, his eyes red from crying. When can we talk? I let him in, and we sat at the kitchen table where Marcus and I had shared thousands of meals, where we'd taught Paulo to do his homework, where we'd celebrated every achievement of his childhood. Now we sat there as adversaries or something close to it. I'm going to prison, Paulo said without preamble. My lawyer says with the evidence against me, a plea deal is my best option. 5 to 7 years if I cooperate fully. I know. You destroyed my life. No, Paulo, you destroyed your life. I just refused to be destroyed along with you. He was quiet for a long time. Then Melissa left. She got bail and immediately disappeared. Her lawyer says she violated bail conditions and there's a warrant. Apparently, she's been running scams like this for years, finding vulnerable men with access to money, manipulating them into stealing, then disappearing before consequences catch up. I was just her latest mark. I'm sorry. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, You seem pretty satisfied with how this turned out. I'm satisfied that I still have my house. That's different from being satisfied that my son is going to prison. I reached across the table, took his hand. Paulo, I love you. I have always loved you. But love doesn't mean protecting you from consequences. It means holding you accountable while still caring about your welfare. You could have helped me quietly. Why did you have to expose me publicly? Because quiet help would have enabled you. You would have paid back what you stole, learned nothing, and done it again later. Public exposure means you can't hide from what you did. It means you have to face it, own it, change because of. I hate you for this. I know, and I'm sorry you hate me. But Paulo, in 5 years or 7 years, when you get out of prison, you'll have a choice. You can stay the man who stole and blamed others, or you can become the man who made terrible mistakes and learned from them. I'm hoping you choose the second option, but I can't make that choice for you. He left without saying goodbye, and I sat in that kitchen crying for the son I'd lost, the boy he'd been, the man he'd become. But I also felt something unexpected relief that I'd chosen myself, that I'd refused to be victimized, that I'd stood up, even when standing up meant breaking my own heart. The trial was 4 months later. Paulo pleaded guilty to embezzlement and fraud. The judge, seeing his cooperation and remorse, sentenced him to 5 years. Melissa was still missing, subject to federal warrants and Interpol alerts. Her husband finally got his divorce decree, and there were rumors she'd fled to Mexico or maybe Colombia. Somewhere extradition was complicated. I attended Paulo's sentencing, sat in the courtroom watching my son be led away in handcuffs, and I felt like I was dying. This was my child, my baby, being taken to prison because I'd exposed him. The guilt was crushing, suffocating, until I remembered why I'd done it, because the alternative was being homeless, penniless, destroyed by my own son's crime. After the sentencing, Paulo's lawyer approached me. "Mrs. Silva, Paulo asked me to give you this." He handed me a letter. I didn't read it until I got home. Sat in my living room with a cup of coffee and opened the envelope with shaking hands. Man, I'm writing this before sentencing, not knowing if I'll get 5 years or 10, but knowing I deserve whatever I get. I've spent 4 months in therapy, in introspection, in trying to understand how I became someone who would steal from clients and try to take your house. Here's what I've learned. I was weak. Melissa was manipulative. Yes, she targeted me specifically because she knew I'd be easy to corrupt, but I made every choice myself. I stole the first dollar, then the second, then the 100,000. I asked for your house. I planned to steal it if you said no. Every step was mine, even if Melissa was whispering in my ear. You were right to expose me. I hate that you were right, but if you'd helped me quietly, I would have learned nothing. I would have blamed you for not helping sooner, for not helping more, for not completely erasing my mistakes. I would have become even more entitled, even more dangerous. Instead, you forced me to face consequences. And in facing them, I'm finally seeing clearly. I see how much you and Pi sacrificed. I see how ungrateful I was. I see that asking you to give up your home, the home where Pi died, where we were a family, was monstrous. I see that I became a monster, and I don't know how to become human again. Prison will give me time to figure it out, I guess. Time to read, to think, to work on becoming someone better than the person I've been. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to visit. I just want you to know that despite my earlier anger, I understand now why you did what you did. You loved me enough to let me fail, to let me face consequences, to refuse to sacrifice yourself for my mistakes. That's harder than enabling me would have been. That's actually what love looks like. Difficult, painful. Refusing to make things easy when easy means enabling destruction. I'm sorry, Mai. For everything. For trying to steal your house. For choosing Melissa over you. For becoming someone Pi would be ashamed of. I can't undo any of it, but I can try to become someone who wouldn't do it again. That's all I have left. the possibility of change. Ti amo mesmo quando não mereço seu amor. Paulo. I read that letter 5 times, crying through each one. This was the son I'd raised, the one capable of insight, of remorse, of taking responsibility. He'd been buried under greed and manipulation, but he was still there, still possible to reach, still worth hoping for. I wrote back a short letter saying I loved him, that I'd visit once he was settled in prison, that I believed he could become better. I didn't forgive him in that letter. Forgiveness takes time, maybe years, but I offered him something more important, hope that redemption was possible if he did the work. Over the next year, I visited Paulo monthly. We didn't talk about the past much. That was too painful, too raw. We talked about books he was reading, classes he was taking, the job he'd gotten in the prison library, small conversations, rebuilding trust slowly, brick by brick, though the foundation was still shaky. And I did something else. I started a blog, called it When Your Child Asks for Everything, and wrote about my experience, about the impossible choice between protecting yourself and protecting your children, about what love looks like when it requires saying no. The blog went viral. Thousands of parents shared their own stories of being exploited by adult children, of struggling with the guilt of choosing themselves. Within 6 months, I had 50,000 followers. Within a year, I'd written a book based on the blog, The Gift of No, When Loving Your Child Means Setting Boundaries. It became a bestseller, purchased mostly by parents who'd faced similar choices, who needed permission to stop sacrificing themselves for ungrateful children. The book advance was substantial, more money than I'd ever had in my life. I paid off my house completely. It had been close to paid off anyway. Set up a trust for Paulo's legal fees and restitution payments, donated to organizations helping families affected by financial crime, and I kept the house. My house where Marcos and I had built our life, where Paulo had grown up, where I would grow old. But the real gift, the one I hadn't anticipated, came from an unexpected source. 18 months after the trial, I got a call from the FBI. Mrs. Silva, we found Melissa Montgomery. She was arrested in Costa Rica, trying to scam another Mark. She's being extradited to face charges here, but there's something else you should know. What? When we searched her belongings, we found documents. Evidence that she'd been planning to do much more than just steal your house. She had forged documents ready to transfer your house into her name directly, bypassing Paulo entirely. She was going to take everything, your house, your savings, even your Social Security. If you hadn't exposed her at the engagement party, you would have lost everything within 6 months. I sat down hard, my legs giving out. She was going to steal everything. Everything. And she's done it before to 3 other elderly people in Texas and California. One died homeless. Another committed suicide. You exposing her saved not just yourself, but potentially dozens of future victims. She won't be running scams anymore. She's looking at 25 years minimum. After I hung up, I sat in my living room in my house that was still mine because I'd fought back, and I understood something profound. Exposing Paulo at that engagement party hadn't just been about revenge or justice. It had been about survival, about recognizing predators before they destroyed me completely. The FBI asked if I'd testify at Melissa's trial. I agreed, and 6 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom and told my story. Not just what had happened to me, but what could have happened if I hadn't investigated, if I'd trusted my son blindly, if I'd signed those papers. The prosecutor showed the jury the forged documents Melissa had prepared. My signature copied expertly, notarizations faked, transfer papers ready to file. She'd been planning to take my house, liquidate it, and disappear while Paulo took the blame for everything. He'd been her patsy, not her partner, though he'd been willing enough that the distinction barely mattered. When I testified, I looked at Melissa for the first time since the engagement party. She'd lost weight, looked older, but her eyes were still calculating even in handcuffs. When I described the engagement party, how I'd exposed them, she actually smiled, a cold, predatory smile that said she'd do it all again if given the chance. The jury convicted her on all counts. 28 years in federal prison,
She'd be 70 before she was eligible for parole. And even then, parole was unlikely given the severity of her crimes and her complete lack of remorse. As they led her out of the courtroom, she looked at me one last time and mouthed, "You got lucky." But I didn't feel lucky. I felt like someone who'd fought for their life and won, which was different from luck. Luck is passive. What I'd done was active, deliberate, choosing survival over family loyalty when family loyalty meant my destruction. Paulo was in the courtroom too. They'd transported him from prison to testify about how Melissa had manipulated him. When I saw him in his prison uniform, thin and tired, but somehow more present than he'd been in years, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness exactly, but compassion. He'd been a victim too, even though his victimhood didn't erase his choices. After the trial, they let us talk briefly before taking him back to prison. We sat in a small conference room with a guard outside the door. Many I heard what she was planning. Taking everything, not just the house. She would have destroyed you completely. I know. If you hadn't exposed us at the party, if you'd signed those papers, you'd have nothing now. No house, no savings, no social security. You'd be homeless or dead. Yes, you saved yourself. And you saved me from being her accomplice in that. I would have been charged as part of the conspiracy to defraud you of everything. Instead, I'm serving 5 years for embezzlement, which is still terrible, but it's not conspiracy to financially destroy my own mother. He started crying. "Thank you for exposing us. Thank you for refusing to be destroyed. Thank you for being stronger than I was." I held my son's hand across that table, both of us crying, both of us understanding that sometimes the cruelest kindness is letting people face the full weight of their choices. Paulo had 2 more years in prison. When he got out, he'd be 42, starting over with nothing but the possibility of being better than he'd been. "When you get out," I said, "if you want a relationship with me, we'll build one. Not the old one that's gone, but something new, built on honesty instead of obligation. Can you do that? I want to try. I don't know if I can, but I want to try." That's all I'm asking. 2 years later, Paulo was released early for good behavior. He moved back to Austin, but didn't ask to stay with me. Didn't even ask for help finding an apartment. He got a job as a bookkeeper at a nonprofit. He could never work in finance again after his conviction. Found a small apartment, started rebuilding his life quietly. We had dinner once a month. Awkward dinners at first, neither of us knowing quite how to be with each other. But slowly, painfully, we found a rhythm. He'd tell me about his job, his therapy, the amends he was making to his victims. I'd tell him about my book, my blog, the speaking engagements I'd started doing about family financial abuse. One dinner, about 6 months after his release, Paulo brought something with him, a small wooden box. "No, I made this in prison. Wood shop class. It's not much, but..." I opened the box. Inside was a key, a copy of the key to my house that I'd never given him, that he'd had to surrender when he went to prison. "I'm not asking to move back in," he said quickly. "This is symbolic. I'm giving back access to your house, your home, your sanctuary. I'm giving you back control. You decide if I ever get a key again. You decide if I'm ever welcome in your home again. It's your choice, not mine." I held that key, feeling the weight of what it represented. "Keep it," I said. "For emergencies only. If I'm sick, if something happens, you can come in to help. But Paulo, you're right, it's my home. And you're welcome to visit, but you'll never live there again. That door is closed." "I understand." He smiled, sad but genuine. "I understand why it has to be that way." Over the next 3 years, Paulo proved himself slowly. He never missed a dinner. He paid back every victim of his embezzlement, even though bankruptcy would have been easier. He volunteered at the same nonprofit where he worked, helping formerly incarcerated people rebuild their lives. He stayed single, focused on healing rather than relationship, and he did something that surprised me.
He started speaking to at-risk youth about the consequences of financial crime. Went to high schools and colleges, told his story honestly, how he'd stolen from clients, how his own mother had to expose him, how he'd lost everything, including 5 years of his life. The programs loved him because he didn't make excuses, didn't sugarcoat, just told the truth about how one bad choice led to another until his whole life collapsed. You would have been proud of Pi, I told him after one of his school presentations that I'd attended. Watching you take responsibility, helping others avoid your mistakes, that's the son he wanted you to be. Do you think he'd forgive me for what I did? I think he'd forgive you for making mistakes. I don't think he'd forgive you for trying to steal my house. That would have hurt him deeply. But Paulo, your father's forgiveness isn't what matters. You need to forgive yourself, which is harder. I'm trying. Some days I can, some days I can't. Some days I wake up and can't believe I was the kind of person who would embezzle from clients and try to manipulate his own mother. That's called growth. Being horrified by who you were means you're not that person anymore. Today, I'm 76 years old. Paulo is 45, still working at the nonprofit, still rebuilding trust slowly. We have dinner every week now, not at my house, but at restaurants, neutral territory where we can build our relationship without the ghosts of the past haunting us. My book is still selling steadily. Apparently, there's an endless supply of parents struggling with the choice between protecting themselves and protecting their children. I get emails daily from people thanking me for permission to say no, for showing them that loving your children doesn't mean being destroyed by them. But the real transformation happened last month. When Paulo called with news, Moni, I'm dating someone. Her name is Rachel. She works at the nonprofit with me. She's a recovering addict, been sober 5 years. She knows everything about my past, the embezzlement, the prison time, everything. And she still wants to build something with me. How does she make you feel? Seen, not judged, not forgiven, just seen. She understands that I'm working on being better. She's not trying to fix me or change me, just witnessing my effort. Is that enough? Can that be love? That's more than enough. That's real love, seeing someone clearly and choosing them anyway, like you did with me. Seeing me clearly, exposing what I'd become, but still loving me enough to hope I'd change. Exactly like that. Though I hope Rachel's journey with you is less dramatic than mine was. He laughed, genuine laughter that sounded like the boy he'd been before Melissa, before the embezzlement, before everything fell apart. I promise, no theft, no fraud, no asking anyone to give up their home. Just honest work, honest living, honest love. That's all anyone can ask for. Last week, Paulo brought Rachel to meet me. We had dinner at a small Brazilian restaurant in Austin, and I watched them together, the way she touched his arm when he seemed nervous, the way he made sure she was comfortable, the way they navigated their relationship with the careful attention of people who'd both been broken and were determined not to break each other. At the end of dinner, Rachel asked to speak to me privately. We stepped outside while Paulo paid the bill, and she said, "Mrs. Silva, Paulo told me what happened. The engagement party, the exposure, everything. And I need you to know what you did saved his life. If you'd given him that house, if you'd enabled his crimes, he'd be dead or in prison forever. Instead, he got 5 years and a chance to become someone better. Thank you for loving him enough to let him fall." It was the hardest thing I've ever done, including burying my husband. I believe that. But Mrs. Silva, the man I'm dating, the one who speaks to at-risk kids, who works with formerly incarcerated people, who's honest about his mistakes, that man exists because you refused to make those mistakes disappear. You gave him the gift of consequences. Not everyone is strong enough to do that for someone they love. After they left, I sat in my car in the restaurant parking lot and cried, not from sadness, but from relief. Relief that the story that had started with an engagement party disaster had somehow impossibly led to this. My son becoming someone worthy of being loved, someone who could love in return, someone who understood that the opposite of enabling isn't abandonment, it's accountability with love. The envelope I'd given them at the engagement party, the one with all the evidence, all the proof of their crimes, had been meant as a weapon, but it had become something else, a catalyst for transformation. Not instant transformation, not easy transformation, but real change earned through years of work and pain and choice. People still recognize me sometimes from the viral video of the engagement party speech that someone had recorded and posted online. Aren't you the woman who exposed her son? Some say it with admiration, some with judgment. I've learned to accept both because the truth is complicated and so are the reactions to truth. I destroyed my son's engagement. I sent him to prison. I refused to sacrifice myself to save him. And in doing so, I saved us both, him from becoming an irredeemable criminal, me from being his victim. Sometimes destruction is the only path to reconstruction. And sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to someone you love is make things easy for them. My son's fiancée demanded I sign over my house. I gave them evidence of their crimes instead. And years later, after prison and therapy and slow rebuilding, Paulo thanked me for it. Said it was the greatest gift I'd ever given him. Not my house, not my savings, not even my love, but my refusal to enable his destruction. I don't know if that makes me a good mother or a cruel one. Maybe I'm both. Maybe we're all both capable of tremendous love and tremendous hardness, depending on what the situation demands. What I do know is this. I still have my house. Paulo has a chance at a real life. And the woman who tried to destroy us both is in prison where she can't hurt anyone else. That's not a perfect ending, but it's an honest one. And after everything we went through, the lies, the manipulation, the crimes, the exposure, honesty feels like victory enough. My name is Teresa Silva. I'm 76 years old. My son tried to steal my house to cover up his crimes. I exposed him at his engagement party, sent him to prison, and destroyed his life as he knew it. And then I watched him rebuild that life into something better, something honest, something his father would finally be proud of. They wanted my house. I gave him the truth instead. And in the end, the truth was the only gift that mattered. Brutal, painful, devastating, but also liberating, transformative, life-saving. Sometimes love looks like saying yes. Sometimes it looks like saying no. And sometimes when your child is drowning in their own mistakes, love looks like refusing to drown with them. I chose to swim. And eventually, finally, Paulo learned to swim too. The end